Mangy Fetlocks here, reading from part 3 of my collection of stories, North Country Ballroom. We kind of pick up the action at the ball, as they called it, the Elmer's Ball, which is a fundraiser benefit to help defray some of the costs from the hospitalization he had to endure after accidentally cutting off one of his testicles with his chainsaw. To my way of thinking, the nicest item at the auction table was the purple and silver swirl pattern bowling ball which Elmer himself had donated. He'd coated it with Armorall so that it looked like brand new, although he'd had that ball for at least 6 years, and with the stage lights reflecting off of it as it sat nestled atop a white fake fur toilet rug that one of the Lions members had donated, it looked like a sacred relic from some type of New Age temple. As an appetizer, cheese curds had been donated by Emil Anderson, whose son-in-law did trucking for the cheese factory over in Milton, thereby making him eligible for a company discount on any cheese that was just a little bit past its sell-by date. Garlic toast was available to all of the tables of people, and although alcohol was strictly prohibited in the town hall, for those who knew who to ask, 2 3-liter boxes of really nice red wine served up in paper cups was available from Smallmouth Henderson, the town budget wine connoisseur, who was manning the spigot while nonchalantly smoking a hand-rolled cigarette outside the back door as he awaited his primary task of heading up the cleanup detail once the first plates began to come back in from the dinner. Once the cheese curds were gone, Donny, who had been asked to act as master of ceremonies for the event, rang the Lions Club's meeting bell to get the attention of the crowd. The bell was not actually a true bell, but rather a brake drum from a 1952 Chevy Deluxe that Donny and Elmer's dad had owned. In the late 1960s, their father, Vernon Hanson, using just a carbide skill saw blade and a hacksaw, had removed the back part of the roof, rear window, and trunk from the Chevy and had made it into a sort of pickup truck onto which he fit a wooden flatbed deck constructed from rough-cut 2x6s surrounded by a 5-foot-high slat-side box. The do-it-yourself El Camino/flatbed truck looked pretty odd, but was actually a fairly serviceable work vehicle, perfect for hauling smaller livestock, water tanks for the farm, large household appliances, and had even once served as an emergency ambulance, or more precisely, hearse, although they didn't know that for some time until later. The one time that Lily Mackey had found her brother Einar next to the downed power line in her yard, having apparently somehow electrocuted himself. In 1972, while Vernon was attempting to use his homemade truck to haul their Hereford bull Ray over to a neighbor's place for stud service, Ray broke loose from his restraining rope, jumped over the front of the box, and slid down onto the hood of the vehicle, rolling to the left and onto the roadway when Vernon hit the brakes. Once on the road, the bull stopped faster than the car, though, causing the vehicle to drive over the bull's head, whose left horn punctured the front right tire, causing Vernon to lose control and end up in the ditch. A boulder, which the Chevy drove over at the bottom of the ditch, snapped the drive shaft in two and drove part of it up through the driver's seat next to Vernon. The car's radiator was punctured by the fan blades when the car finally stopped against a particularly stout cedar fence post. Miraculously, Vernon was uninjured and Ray survived, possibly due to the fact that the greater portion of his head was fortunate enough to land within the confines of a large and fortuitously located pothole, the bottom of which was all soft clay. Although the entire right side of Ray's head was caked with red clay, Ray knew well enough after the incident to get up and under his own power shake off most of the gravel and clay which was stuck to his head and run like hell down the road. Later, Elmer and Donny were dispatched on their bicycles to follow Ray's tracks down the dirt road for about a mile, at which point the tracks veered off into the woods. They searched for Ray, but never saw height nor hair of him again. It was believed that a novice deer hunter from Minneapolis may have shot him that fall about 10 miles from Elmer's farm. In the local newspaper, there was a report of a hunter that suffered a fatal heart attack while attempting to drag a dressed-out Hereford bull out of the woods alone. Stories of idiotic silly dwellers coming up and mistaking cattle for deer were common enough, so no one thought twice about the incident, and the Hansons made no effort to further investigate the story, fearing that if the bull in question were Ray, they might somehow be found legally responsible for the hunter's death. Better to just keep quiet. The homemade El Camino was permanently abandoned right where it stopped in the ditch, utilized on occasion as a parts car, and it was in that way that one of the brake drums had come to be removed and eventually end up among the Lions Club items for general use. After Donny struck what was now known as the Bell of Unity a second time, he waited for the crowd to quiet down a bit, then began by thanking everyone for coming and extending special thanks to those who had volunteered their time or donated items for the silent auction. Donny said a few words about how great it was to have the community come together like this, and then he went on about how 9/11 had changed America and that terrorists weren't ever going to be a threat to northern Wisconsin so long as men were free to have guns and chainsaws and four-wheel drive recreational vehicles and worship a Christian God of their choice. A lot of guys in the crowd nodded approvingly, while some even removed their caps and wiped their eyes. Elmer just sat quietly, deeply worried about whether Donny had gone off his meds again. Donny told the audience he'd like to close with a poem that he had written especially for the occasion. To enhance his reading with a bit of music, Donny had brought along a boombox, into which he'd placed a cassette tape of Zamfir playing America the Beautiful on the panpipes. As the opening strain softly began, Donny, in a high tenor speaking voice, read aloud. For Elmer, a soldier wounded on the battlefield of life. Oh, beautiful for patriot's dream, I think I heard a logger scream while cutting logs down by the stream. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, red blood stains on his blue Levi's. He suffered loss like lots of guys. Oh, beautiful for amber waves, we will not be Bin Laden's slaves. We can't be bound when Jesus saves. Oh, beautiful for northern woods, thank God for silent auction goods like V8 engines. Neath the hoods of 4x4s, I think we should devote ourselves to service all for teammates who have dropped a ball. By the time Donny got to the last verse, big tears were beginning to well up in his eyes. Elmer couldn't look at him because he was afraid he'd cry too, not because of the poem, but simply because he loved his brother Donny and felt so damn bad for him, fully aware that, like so many times before, Donny was probably going to mail his poem off to one of his 3 favorite magazines, Soldier of Fortune, Fin and Feather, and American Logging Quarterly, in hopes of finally getting one of his works published. And once again, just like with Lorraine, all he'd get for his efforts was rejection and a broken heart. Thanks for listening.